All right. I think we are live. All right. Welcome in, everyone. Really glad to be here this morning. Doing a live stream. We're going to be talking about Venus and Jupiter, one of the more auspicious planetary combinations. Whenever these two benefics get together, the astrology world lights up. It's Christmas in astrology world. We're going to talk about the two benefics, what it looks like and feels like when they get together, why this is generally considered such an auspicious configuration, and really what is good fortune. Kind of a deeper question to meditate on whenever these two planets get together, because there are some really good lessons. I'm going to be reading a text from the I Ching today that came up when I sat with this combination. So we'll take a look at the I Ching. We'll give some astrological context. We're going to talk about the fact that Jupiter is in the superior position in the aspect dynamic. What does that look like? What might it look like if it were the opposite? So some little nuances that can help. We're also going to talk about how powerful Jupiter is right now in the sky through the dignity scheme. I think all of these things will be really nice context for the Venus-Jupiter trine this week. One of the more benefic signatures in the sky in all of the year. Anytime the benefics get together, it typically it typically works that way. But also, again, if you watch my channel, you know that we're not above looking at some of the shadows of the benefics either. So we'll make sure we get some well-rounded coverage today. But before we get into it, where are you all coming from? Let's do a little roll call. I'd love to just get a feel for where you're coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and Evelyn's coming from Toronto, Canada. I love this. Angie's coming from Vienna. That's awesome. That's really cool. Cosmic Rose loves the I Ching readings. Good. And I have a really fun announcement about the I Ching that I'm going to make today as well. Jeanette from sunny Arizona, Practical Astros from Asheville, North Carolina. There are astrologers in Asheville, I'm told. The UK, straight out of hell from JC. I love that. From Belgium, from Arlington, Washington. Let's see where else. Northeast Ohio, Montreal, Santa Barbara. Dirty Blonde is from Arizona, Alexandria, Virginia. Oh, that's right where, not far from where I used to live. Let's see, Stockton, of course, Bucharest, Romania. Love that. From London, Kentucky, UK. All right, we've got some folks from across the pond tuning in. North Carolina and Buffalo. Oh my gosh, upstate New York, Gettysburg, Bend, Oregon. I love this. From Uruguay. Oh my gosh, welcome in. Scrolling down from Mexico, more from Romania. Adam, what do you think of the Sabian symbols? they're magical and interesting if you use them thoughtfully, and I think with some intention and care. Then they're totally valid set of symbols in my mind, a lot like fixed stars in a way, or lots even. Let's see, Helsinki. All right, good. Glad you're here. And from Brazil and from Paris. Where else? Canada. Good morning from the land of wine, weed, and wood, Sebastopol, California. Astrologers everywhere. It's like we should make like a Dr. Seuss book. The world loves you, Adam. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. I do not love the world. I'm just kidding. Are you going to take random astro questions today? Yeah, so let's go ahead and start getting into it now. I always like to take some time for roll call at the beginning. It allows people who are just arriving to join us in the live stream. So once we have good, we got 150 people here now, we'll get started. It's really great to hear where you're all coming from. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to promote the Kickstarter to begin with, and then we're going to talk about the Venus-Jupiter trine. We're going to do some horoscopes, and then I'm going to promote the Kickstarter again, and then we're going to turn into some Q&A to close, and that Q&A will be wide open. So the question portion will come at the end after we've talked about Venus, Jupiter, and done some horoscopes for all 12 signs. I have a chocolate protein bar with me this morning as my snack because I'm out of dark chocolate. Need to get some more. So we'll make it through. But all right. So again, welcome in everyone. Before we get into it, as always, if you're listening, liking, subscribing, dropping a comment in the comment section, this helps us tremendously. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers on the channel by next summer. It's a lofty goal, but I do think we can get there. There's lots of people who come in and visit this channel and start watching and forget to take that 2 seconds to click the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously as a business and a community. So if you have a second, please do that. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Now, as you know, this channel, this is our 12th annual Kickstarter campaign. And if you're new to the channel, the way this works is the last days of every calendar year, we raise money to support the production of all the content on the channel. And basically the Kickstarter acts as a flash sale for all of our programs. So you can get the best sales of the year on any of our programs. There's 4 years worth of curriculum at Nightlight for people who want to study natal astrology from the Hellenistic standpoint. All of our programs are sort of a blend of ancient astrology and modern astrology. So the Kickstarter really helps us as a school. And we have a staff of 12 people, a full-time social media manager who, with myself, there is about 3 hours dedicated every single day to curating the content on this channel, now 7 days a week. This channel is a place that has begun to support talented students from within our community, getting a chance to build a platform for themselves and develop their skills as content creators. So Nightlight is about building the success of the field, the community. When you support the channel, you're not just supporting me. Of course, this is a huge part of how I earn my livelihood, but and support my family. But it's also how we support all of our need-based tuition, sliding scale offerings, which make sure that people coming from a wide variety of different backgrounds can study astrology. So you're going to find the link to the Kickstarter campaign in the comments section, and you're also going to find it in the description of this video. After the live stream is done, the replay will have a comment section post where you can click. You're going to head over to the Kickstarter campaign, and I will show you what it looks like. So right now we have 37 days left to go before the end of the Kickstarter. We finished New Year's Eve. Our goal is to get to 2,043 backers. That's one better than we did last year. Hopefully we'll smash that number and go way over. I think last year was 1,900 something. So we ended up doing, like a good 100 backers more than we did the previous year. Every year, we're just trying to build and grow the community, build the support. And again, like your donation, if you like this channel, a simple way of supporting it is to pitch in and donate. The backer total matters. The total financial numbers, if we reach our backer total, we know are going to likely land in the area that we need to be, which is kind of a range every year. So anyway, you scroll down, you're going to see all of the different rewards that are available when you donate. There's a lot of exclusive content I don't offer anywhere else. Some of the simple rewards include the Astrology of 2026 calendar, a talk that I have made on the importance of silence and meditation in our lives and how you can, what the value of it is and how you can get a practice started. The Astrology of 2026 video covers all the major astrological events of the year ahead. I'm not releasing that anywhere else. You can find a guided meditation for the year ahead to help you visualize and set intentions. My new book will be starting, I'll be starting to release my new book chapter by chapter. This is my second book. My first one I just finished. So this is a new book and brand new. You'll be getting that chapter by chapter in the year ahead. Year ahead horoscope readings give you about 6 hours worth of horoscopic content for the major transits of 2026 for each rising sign. That's all 12 rising signs you get. And then you'll see a bunch of different class offerings, master classes from previous years, all of our courses greatly discounted, some reading bundles for horary. You'll also notice that at the bottom, really are including our masterclass, we have some new offerings, the guild membership, my wife's Herbal Foundations courses, and then all of the Nightlight class bundles, 1, 2, 3, 4 class bundles. They never expire. You can use them whenever you want. All of the classes that you can use them on are listed there. And if you have questions about all those programs, you can check out the website, nightlightastrology.com, where all of the classes are explained in depth. So anyway, we are needing a lot of support every day. Our goal is, about 20 to 30 backers a day is a pretty good pace for this time of the campaign. Today we have 6 or 7 backers already to start the day. So we're off to a good start. But the purpose of this live stream is to drum up some support. So while you're listening, if you're like, hey, you know what? Nightlight plays an important role in my spiritual life year round. This content is meaningful to you and contributes something positive to your life, then consider a $5 donation or a $10 or pick up some awesome reward that we offer. And then you can really feel like you're a part of what makes all of this happen. It's a very beautiful business model that provides many people who otherwise couldn't take professional level, like first class, some of the best classes in the world on ancient astrology that otherwise wouldn't be financially accessible are because people like yourself value this channel and support it. So thank you for all that you do. Now, on that note, let's turn our attention to, and I'm going to actually just drop the link one more time into the chat box. I see a couple of questions there. If someone donates to get the year ahead reading, do they get to provide context to you related to what they're interested in? So the year ahead readings sold out this morning, so those are gone. But the year ahead, so we have the year ahead overview, like here's all the biggest transits for the year ahead. And then we have horoscope readings, which are, you're going to get like all 12 whole sign, rising sign, or sun sign horoscopes for the year ahead. It's about 6 hours worth of content. So that's what's left in terms of the readings. Otherwise, there is, let's see. Otherwise, there is a, what am I thinking of? Oh, horary. So there's a 3 horary package where you can get 3 horary readings and use them anytime you want in the year ahead. If you don't know what a horary reading is, go to the readings tab of our website and you can see what they are. I do those personally. So those are the only readings that would be left that are personalized. And in those readings, yes, you definitely tell me your context. Does YouTube steal money for super chats? I believe they do take a percentage. So please use the Kickstarter. Don't use super chats during Kickstarter season. We can't emphasize that enough. But thank you either way for even thinking about us. It means a lot. Okay, so on that note, let's head over to the real-time clock and get started. Okie dokie. So what we are looking at is the trine of Venus to Jupiter. This trine of Venus to Jupiter is considered one of the more auspicious transits in astrology for a few reasons. One, you've got the two benefics getting together, so you have some of the more auspicious symbolism starting to blend or combine. And that's what most people feel is so auspicious or, like conducive to good fortune or good luck. But it's also the fact that these two planets in this particular configuration are meeting in what is also considered the most benefic aspect, which is a trine. Trines were said to be of the nature of Jupiter, and so you have a very benefic connection between the two benefics. That's what tends to make the trine so powerful. Now, added to that, one of the two planets, Jupiter, is exalted, which means you have a benefic in really good condition. Venus is a little banged up. She's under the beams of the sun. She's in the sign of her detriment. She's coming into the transformational stage that will take her from a morning star back into an evening star. So during that process, she's invisible, somewhat behind the scenes. So Venus a little dinged up within the dynamic, but the connection with Jupiter is important because within this aspect dynamic, we also have Jupiter in the superior trine. What that means is that the aspect is coming off from Jupiter's right-hand side. And in ancient Hellenistic astrology, that means that Jupiter has the more influential power within the combination. Now, you can always tell what is superior within an aspect, and the only aspects that can have an inferior or superior dynamic are sextile, squares, or trines. If you want to learn about this stuff, come study with us. But let me just show you what I mean. So if you imagine that you're Jupiter in this chart and you're looking into the center of the wheel, Jupiter looking into the center of the wheel is making the aspect to Venus over here. So if you were if you're Jupiter and you're like a person looking into the center of the wheel, the aspect to Venus is coming off from your right-hand side. You can imagine it's like your right shoulder. It's going off to the right side of your shoulder if you're looking into the middle of the wheel. So it's kind of a simple way of visualizing it. And so in this sense, Jupiter is in the superior dynamic. Now, if you were to look from Venus's perspective and you look into the middle of the wheel like you're a person, the aspect to Jupiter is coming off from your left. And so that makes it puts Venus in what's called the inferior position. Now, inferior and superior aspect distinctions do not mean like inferior as in less than or bad or worse. And superior doesn't mean I'm better than you. Excuse me. What they're really talking about is sort of whose nature is going to be more pronounced within the mixture. Let's say, for example, that you make a pancake and it's just loaded with blueberries and chocolate chips. You might feel like, yes, I'm eating a pancake, but the overwhelming reality of this eating experience are the chocolate chips and the blueberries. I don't know, I'm making this up. So within the combination of pancake, blueberries and chocolate chips might be experienced as more pronounced within the mixture. So that's a simple way of thinking about what inferior and superior aspects are in any kind of planetary combination that exists through a sextile, square, or trine. One of the two planets in the aspect will tend to inflect itself more or be louder or more pronounced. That is really important because when you're mixing Venus and Jupiter, you can have something that's more Jupiter or more Venus within the mix. In this mix, we have something that's more Jupiter. Well, one of the reasons that's really nice is because Jupiter is very well dignified right now in its own exaltation, whereas Venus is a little banged up. So let's say that you have two siblings and they're going to represent the family in some kind of social situation. You've got You've got Messy Molly. Her hair's a little unkempt. She's very talented and artistic, but today she's in a little bit of a bad mood. Maybe went out too late last night. She's a little dinged up. But then you have enlightened Emily. And enlightened Emily, has a PhD, and she cleans up really nicely, and she's in really good shape. So, and she didn't go out partying last night. She got good sleep. So the two of them, very talented siblings, and in some ways, who cares? It's subjective which one is more talented than the other. But within this dynamic, enlightened Emily will be representing the sisters in the social situation and inflecting a little bit more of her nature on their social exchanges, because she's in better position. That will probably go well for them, right? Because can you imagine if if Messy Molly was so stupid. Okay, so if you can imagine Messy Molly had to like carry the weight of that social burden, then you'd be like, well, she's under the beams of the sun. She's in Scorpio, which is not her most comfortable space. So it's in other words, it's nice that Jupiter is in better position within the dynamic. So that's like a very, speaking of messy, that's a really messy analogy, I guess, to explain why it's a good thing that Jupiter has the superior position, or Jupiter's nature is a little bit more loud within the dynamic, because Venus isn't really in the position to carry that role as strongly as Jupiter is. Does that make sense? Okay, let me show you something else. We're going to shift our wheel here to the other thing that's important to note is that Jupiter's not only in its own exaltation, but Jupiter's in its own bound. The other thing that's important to note is both Venus and Mercury are also in Jupiter's bound. So the combination of Jupiter being in its own exaltation and in its own bound, while Venus is also in Jupiter's bound, that really means that Jupiter's carrying the weight here. And that can help Venus because she's a little dinged up again. So the other thing to note is that the sun right now is also in the domicile of Jupiter in Sagittarius, and in the bound of Jupiter. Mars in the domicile of Jupiter. All of the placements in Pisces are in the domicile of Jupiter. So there is quite a lot in the sky right now that is being managed by benefic Jupiter in Cancer. Now you could play around with the meaning of Jupiter's retrograde. While Jupiter's responsible and exalted, Jupiter is retrograde. So that's a little small qualifier with respect to Jupiter's dignity. But we're not going to get into that. I feel like that's minutia compared to the big picture that I want to try to present today. Anyway, all of this is technical background that I hope is interesting to all of you as we consider any aspect. These details can really make or break the delineation. Now, let's go. So what I want to do next is okay, here we go. I want to read you something from the I Ching. So when I looked at this this morning and I was like prepping for this talk, I thought I'm going to ask the I Ching for a hexagram that can illuminate the meaning of Venus and Jupiter together. All right. By the way, kind of fun special announcement. So I've been talking a lot about Benabel Wen's translation of the I Ching, which I've just come across and is easily my favorite translation of the I Ching I've ever read. And I've read a lot of them over 20 years of consulting the I Ching as a personal oracle, you could say. I've read a lot of I Ching translations. There's good ones out there, but this is my favorite, hands down. Not only that, but Benabel Wen's YouTube channel is chock full of very good information with respect to the I Ching, Taoism, the history of Confucian and Taoist thought in the I Ching. Just really, really good stuff. Anyway, I contacted Benebell Wen and asked if she would consider being a guest on my YouTube channel for an interview and maybe serve as a kind of bridge for people who have never learned about or maybe don't know anything about the I Ching. And she agreed. So she's we're going to organize something. I'm going to talk with her and hopefully we'll have her on the channel sometime in January. But I'm super stoked because to me, she's someone that I really want this audience to be aware of. If you like my work, then I think it's safe to say a majority of you, if you like my work, will probably like hers. That would be a bet I'd be willing to make. So I'm going to introduce you to her in January. Okay. The other thing is she does a lot to talk about the sort of shamanic origins of the I Ching and some of the matriarchal background of the I Ching in folk Chinese shamanism, ancestor worship. Like, oh, she's just brilliant. I haven't been this excited about a spiritual voice / teacher for a while. And I'm not someone who gets very excited very easily about, I mean, people have to really impress me because I've seen a lot and I have very specific taste, I guess. And so, some of the teachers that I've had have just been really luminous. And when I find someone new that I'm like, oh, I really trust their spiritual direction and their intellect and their way of explaining things resonates with, my style, I guess, or my taste, it's really special to me. So I'm very excited to show her off and her work to you guys. Anyway, so excuse me. This is interesting. Been an I Ching student for over a decade. Did you know it correlates to human design? Well, it's actually the other way around. Human design correlates to the I Ching. Not to, I'm just being a jerk. I'm aware of human design, the gene keys, like all of those systems that incorporate the I Ching. I love that they do that. That's super cool. Awesome. Okay. So the reading for this morning was Hexagram 22, which is called Luminosity, and actually came up in another reading that I did. If you follow my work on Sundays, I do some bonus content on Sundays. It allows me to talk about things happening in the field of astrology, track interesting synchronicities with movies or stuff like that. It's kind of fun. Anyway, I recently did one on the Atlas, whatever 3i, whatever that thing, that asteroid or whatever it was, comet, alien spaceship, what have you. And this hexagram number 22 came up in that reading as well. So I think it's interesting that there's some correlation there. But anyway, this hexagram unchanging came up. So I want to read you the hexagram and tell you what it's all about. So in this hexagram, the trigrams put the mountain above the fire or fire below the mountain. I want you to first imagine, like close your eyes and imagine late at night, you're traveling, maybe through the Himalayas or whatever, and you stop and camp and make a fire. And in the light of that fire, there's just enough light where you can look back and see this huge mountain towering in the background. And it's because of that light at the base of the mountain that you're able to perceive the grandeur of the mountain. It's the fire that gives rise to an appreciation, a visibility of something as towering and majestic and sort of otherworldly as a mountain. And so this hexagram is sometimes translated as adornment or grace or decoration because it carries a very intimate, almost symbolic pictorial reference to something little and small, like a fire compared to, like a bonfire compared to a mountain, that nonetheless has the power to illuminate and brighten and make sort of visible something towering and huge and powerful like a mountain at night. So kind of keep that visual reference in mind and even close your eyes and imagine it as we're reading the oracle text. Your public image now suffices for the small undertakings, but the large undertakings will exceed your beauty and grace. A personal journey will strengthen your luminosity. Strive to burn brighter, but through little steps day by day, and not by reckless compromises of yourself. To amplify your luminosity, seek advanced development of your talents and skills. It is a time for acquiring knowledge and experience. Knowledge is your beauty, experience is your grace. Be luminous. There is fire at the base of the mountain, luminosity. The sage possesses clarity of insight into myriad matters of law and policy. You possess the grace, poise, elegance, and presence to show yourself favorably to the public. The mountain fire is luminous. You are adorned. Undertaking the endeavor can reap small gains. The adornments bring favor. But who is the sage without the adornments? A pilgrimage lies ahead. Small gains made upon undertaking the pilgrimage. The fire illuminates a majestic mountain. There is beauty and grace in the form, exuding luminous beauty and grace. Gains are small when luminosity comes from wearing adornments. Beauty is not in form. Grace cannot be limited to appearances. There is no need to be proud of your adornments. Forecast of a short-term or minor expedition. References to adornments as a complete thought indicate adornments that make you beautiful and luminous. In the interest of brevity, each time I meant adornments that make you beautiful and luminous, I simply wrote adornments. The concept here is an attribute that you can acquire, like jewelry, beautifying yourself, or a learned skill, one that is not necessarily inherent to you, but that you have earned. Such an attribute helps you to attract attention, status, and goodwill. Let me give you a simple example that we can all relate to. The rock star. That's an icon, an archetype that we are so well aware of in the West, the rock star, or even the celebrity. But a lot of the times the rock star is a better example because rock stars have to have some tangible skill. The tangible skill is often directly correlated to what becomes this mountain of praise or worship or adoration that they end up receiving. So if I think, for example, of some of my favorite bands, right now, for example, obviously you guys know I'm big on Dead and Company. John Mayer is a good example of someone who's just very, very talented and skilled on the guitar. And a lot of his fame and notoriety is connected to the level at which he has cultivated and developed a skill that very few people have. I mean, very few guitar players, and this is not, I mean, whether you like his music or not, or his personality or his singing or Dead and Company, not many people will disagree that there are few guitar players on planet Earth as talented as he is. He's an incredibly talented guitar player. So when someone develops and cultivates that kind of skill as an artist, as a craftsman or a craftswoman, you have a beautiful singing voice, like Lady Gaga comes to mind, or, you know, because I like her singing voice anyway, or Pink, which is a big hit in our house. My girls love Pink. And you think about the natural talent they have and the way that they've cultivated that talent. Of course, they wear sparkling things on stage, or they have really, you know, they wear the attire of a rock star. But what makes them truly a rock star, if there's any essence that's real and substantive, it's the talent they've cultivated. It's their singing voice. It's the power of the muse flowing through them. It's the amazing skill on the guitar. That is actually what substantively makes them great. And then the clothing, the rock star appearances, all of the other stuff is somewhat superficial. It comes with it. It's like part of the archetypal package, but it's somewhat empty compared to the true substance that has made them great. And one of my favorite things about great artists is they in my opinion, what makes a great artist is someone who's not just talented, but stays kind of humble, because like, yeah, I'm in the rock star archetype. But like Jerry Garcia comes to mind. Jerry was someone who I read his biography a year or two ago, and he said constantly that he didn't mistake his ego for the music. The music was coming through him. He was just a conduit for it. The music was great. He was just someone who happened to love music and cultivated and cultivated and cultivated the ability for music to express through him. But keeping that perspective is really important, because this I Ching hexagram is talking about what makes someone truly beautiful and dazzling is real substantive talent or ability or goodness or virtue or knowledge that's been deeply cultivated and that comes with a sense of humility. I'm not great. I'm just letting something pour through me. And in fact, there's almost like a superstition around taking credit for the things flowing through you, because you're kind of obedient to them. Like Jerry would say in many interviews, he would say, if I started taking credit for any of this, that I would lose the ability to follow the music. To me, that's a very Taoist kind of perspective that's very present in this hexagram. If you want to be truly beautiful, you have to cultivate something on the inside, and then you have to be careful that you never take credit for it, that you never try to get identified with that thing that you've cultivated. This is really important. We're going to link all this to Venus, Jupiter in a second, but I want to unpack this in some more layers. When someone is truly great at something, or truly beautiful or dazzling, what this hexagram is telling us is that the ego that's carrying the mountain behind it can't get conflated with being the mountain. And when you're like, if you think of yourself more like, I'm just a conduit for the music, and people keep telling me I'm wildly talented musically, but I keep using my little ego, the fire at the base of the mountain, to point toward the mountain, that's when real inner greatness starts to come forth. And we become sages, like a sage of music or a sage of singing or a sage of astrology or whatever, because the level at which this thing is pouring through me, I'm not letting my ego get caught up in it so much. And I'm taking every opportunity I can when people say you're great to say, no, it's great. Astrology is great. Music is great. Singing is great. Whatever your talent or skill is, that's the thing that's great. I'm just following it. I'm following its intelligence. Then our ego is like the fire at the base of the mountain. The ego is the thing that just it points to the big thing. And then what's amazing is that we are adorned by the big thing. People are like, wow, that person's really, really talented. And they put the mountain like an earring on our ego. But at every step, we have to avoid that and say, nope, I see what you're doing. It's actually the other way around. I'm just trying to add a little bit of light to this beautiful thing that's much bigger than me. So much of this hexagram has to do with the difference between superficiality and something that's truly great or beautiful. And but the interesting thing is that they're fundamentally connected to one another. So Venus, for example, is, as soon as she comes into existence on the foam of the ocean, she's immediately clothed and adorned. And the reason that she's immediately clothed and adorned is because she is beauty incarnate. She's the goddess Aphrodite, just beauty and love and harmony and symmetry, just perfectly embodied. But in order for that to be real somehow, and for it to not become superficial, or for it not to become problematic in the human psyche, the story goes that she's immediately covered, not in a way that's like prudish, in a way that's like really beautiful. She's given like a silk cover, she's given earrings, and she's adorned. And so in the same way, if you think about truth, just the study of truth, or the approach of truth as spiritual seekers, we're all trying to understand something about what's real or what's true in the cosmos. But part of the way that the cosmos has intentionally cloaked itself in its nature is in beauty. It cloaks itself in material forms. It cloaks itself in ecosystems and living beings and living relationships in matrices of life. And for truth to be revealed, you have to enter into its adornment, its material energy, and learn and move about in it. And then as you are moving about in it, the inner substance becomes revealed through the adornment of the material forms. This is like ancient philosophy in both the East and the West. So one of the things that this hexagram speaks to is also about not getting lost in superficial phenomenon, but also not discarding it as unimportant. Think about all of the religious traditions that have told us that things like sensuality, the body, sex, the feminine, relationships are all just illusions, distractions, that there's some deeper essence that you can only get to when you renounce material things. That's puritanical, that's problematic, that's repressive. We all know that. We all know that that's a very narrow, rigid way of let's call the material universe evil, right? And then we'll get down to some essence that's truer. The material energy is all just an illusion, and we have to get to some pure monistic essence that's hiding behind it and not get trapped in the evil delusions that it's presenting us with. Think about that. I think all of us have probably been turned off by that kind of philosophy at one point or another. But the I Ching is not telling us that everything external is superficial and bad and everything that's substantive is hiding behind external appearances. That would be a very shallow reading of this hexagram. Instead, what it's saying is that there's a correlation between the external and the internal, and that ideally what the external does, the external form, the external color, the external flash, the external beauty, is it illuminates, like the fire at the base of the mountain, the archetypal, the eternal, the timeless, the transcendental, the internal thing that's hiding behind the form or behind the appearance. It illuminates us and points us in that direction so we can have a substantive, real, beautiful, living, embodied relationship with it. That's what this hexagram is about. So in the same way that a rock star says, hey, it's not me, it's the music. That's a humble rock star. That's someone who's taking the flash and the beauty, and they're not confusing themselves with the source of it. They're not confusing their ego with it. They're saying, no. Like, this music is bigger than me. And in that way, again, they take on the mantle of rock star. They go to the stadiums, they wear the fun clothes, they own it, but they know so they don't put the cart before the horse. They know it's not about them. It's about something bigger. All musicians I can ever think of that I've really loved have been the ones whose egos fall into the background of the music. You know what I mean? And that's the lesson here. Well, that's a very Venus-Jupiter lesson. It's a super Venus-Jupiter lesson because our like, for example, I think this is unanimous among all the women in my life, friends, girlfriends, definitely my wife, like that from the time I was a kid, a girlfriend in 7th grade, or like all of my life and relationships with women that I've had. I have noticed over and over, and this is just kind of like stereotypical gender stuff, I guess, but in women's fashion, something that I've noticed is that I've always been attracted to women who have a clear sense of who they are in relation to the fashion that they wear, so that the fashion kind of points you to something about their essence. And that doesn't mean there's only one person in there. They may have different styles, different modes that point to different parts of themselves. But I love, and really anyone, like men or women, but I just noticed this in the lives of like my sister, my mom, just like the women in my life, that there's a thing in women's fashion. And I even think about some fashion influencers that my wife listens to, where it's like, let the adornments that you choose be reflective of your deeper, truest nature. And you can tell the difference between when any human being is overcompensating or trying to create something substantive by what they wear versus the things that they wear complementing and drawing out their essence. it's like a feeling that you get. And again, it's like, it's really doesn't matter about gender is like irrelevant. I'm just thinking of the women in my life who have also probably helped me develop a sense of fashion that I just never had. But anyway, what I've figured out for my own fashion taste is very similar. What I wear has to feel like me. And what I wear can't be trying to present a version of me that I wish was who I am, but I'm not. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think everyone goes on this journey with figuring out what feels good to wear, what looks good and feels good, what draws out parts of you that you love versus what's overcompensation or sort of fake. So with Venus-Jupiter contact, so much of it is about getting the external appearance and the internal substance to be correspondent. And for us not to put superficial things in front of essential things in the hopes that there will be some that it'll make up for something that's lacking internally. So in fact, the relationships between Venus and Jupiter were often seen as bringing up, for example, if Venus is in the superior position over Jupiter in these ancient texts, there are a number of passages that suggest that your religious principles will be overcome by material desires. And you can see where there's a lot of these delineation texts betray the times and, other things. So I certainly wouldn't take that as gospel, but you could see how that could be the case. If Venus was in the superior position within a trine to Jupiter, you might say to yourself, what will make me look really spiritual, because I'm starting to realize spiritual things matter to me. This is so common, by the way. When we owned a yoga studio, I saw this happen to so many people. I feel like meditation and yoga are really, wow, this is really changing my life. And there's genuine excitement about that. So you know what we do to make it real? We go get a fucking lotus tattoo on our shoulder and we buy $2,000 worth of Lululemon yoga pants. And we think by doing those things, I will make this inner thing that I'm starting to discover more real. I'm not above that. I've done things like that. I remember some of the choices I made when I first got back that were sort of trying to kind of externalize and concretize some of the inner experiences I had with ayahuasca. But unfortunately, those things can actually end up becoming an obstacle that we create for ourselves. We have to purge ourselves of some superficial representation that we've tried to put as the cart before the horse with something internal or spiritual. And then it's not like it matters if you get a lotus tattoo or wear whatever pants you wear. The point is whether or not, like, what we're putting in what order of importance and centrality. And so the idea of adornment is, like, for example, I've talked to multiple tattoo artists in my life who have been friends with or have been closer to. So, closer personal relationship. And they have talked about, as a tattoo artist, they hold space for whoever comes in, whatever they want to get, but they see a lot of people who very quickly and impulsively try to make something internal, a relationship. I'll get David tattooed on my shoulder, right? It's about, in the tattoo artists that I really like, I always appreciate it when people come in for getting inked up that have really sort of integrated and internalized some change or some experience, and then the thing comes to represent it in a really beautiful way. And that tattoo artists are frequently able to tell the difference when someone is sort of putting the cart before the horse with inner substance and integration and external adornment and representation. Does that make sense? So you could see why in the ancient world, if Venus was in the superior position over Jupiter, someone might say, oh yeah, you're trying to create spiritual substance by buying the yoga pants before the substance of the experience has become like a gravitational center that the yoga pants aren't compensating for. It's not about the yoga pants at the end of the day, in other words. So, oh my gosh. So let's reread the oracle now and offer some more commentary. Your public image now suffices for the small undertakings, but the large undertakings will exceed your beauty and grace. So another interesting thing that this hexagram is saying is that when it comes to doing really large or big things, sometimes we need a certain kind of social clout. We need a certain kind of image socially. And this hexagram can be saying you don't sort of have the public image that you need to accomplish something. But then its advice is not to try to compensate for that and create that public clout in a superficial way. No, develop your inner substance, develop your skill, develop your ability, develop your virtue, develop your healing, develop your soul. And that will be much more likely to lead you to the kind of influence or position or public image, paradoxically, that you need to actually be successful spiritually and or materially in whatever endeavors you're doing. So this is such an important thing because, in this like influencer age, a lot of the times people will compensate for a lack of knowledge. For example, astrology influencers do this frequently. I notice it, and I understand it. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but it's like, if I'm just confident or dramatic or idiosyncratic and like, if my personality is kind of big enough, that will bring me the influence I need to be successful as an astrologer. If you were to listen, and obviously people can do that and it can work to a certain degree, but this oracle is giving instructions for not only success, let's say, as an astrology influencer, but as a spirit soul that wants to also do astrology. Okay, well, how do you do that? This oracle is saying, develop your knowledge, develop your craft, develop your understanding of astrology, develop the spiritual components of an astrological lifestyle. Develop those things. That will lead you to both the success that you're seeking and the image necessary to succeed. But it can't happen unless you're content to slowly develop the inner substance, which will then come with the external adornments in time. So for matters of trying to develop public prestige or influence or popularity, this is the advice. A personal journey will strengthen your luminosity. Strive to burn brighter, but through little steps day by day, and not by reckless compromises of yourself. To amplify your luminosity, seek advanced development of your talents and skills. Knowledge is your beauty. Experience is your grace. Be luminous. Isn't that awesome? It's really telling us, like, if you want to be popular, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be popular, but the real popular within the scope of, an enlightened, sagely perspective, what is popularity? Popularity is people who shine. They shine with the real essence of a cultivated spirit soul. And as you do that, little by little, day by day, any public, first of all, any superficial agendas or ambitions you have will fall off because they're not enlightened and you're becoming enlightened. But then whatever is worthy of your ambition that aligns with the luminosity you're developing will be achieved because you'll have the right kind of status, the right kind of popularity, the right kind of influence, the right kind of prestige for the right kind of goals. This is very important for Venus-Jupiter because Venus-Jupiter has so much to do with wanting to be liked, wanting to be knowledgeable, wanting to be popular, wanting to get along with other people, anything from like wanting to be an influencer to a teacher to a coach to a prominent artist. This is the advice that the I Ching is giving us. There's fire at the base of the mountain, luminosity. The sage possesses clarity of insight into myriad matters of law and policy. So a sage understands how the world works. There's often an image of a sage as someone living in a cave who's completely disinterested in the world. But what's interesting is that in the I Ching, the ancient Chinese perspective, some sages were hermits that lived apart, but many sages were a part of the village, a part of the society. And to be a sage in the city, one has to understand how people work and what they like and what they don't like, and what's popular, what's not, what has influence, what doesn't. But there's a way to do that. And it means not putting the cart before the horse. Don't think about being liked and popular. Think about understanding human nature. Think about understanding your own. Think about cultivating your highest self. You possess the grace, poise, elegance, and presence to show yourself favorably to the public. The mountain fire is luminous, you are adored. Undertaking the endeavor can reap small gains. The adornments bring favor. But who is the sage without the adornments? The fire illuminates a majestic mountain. There is beauty and grace in the form, exuding luminous beauty and grace. How many times have you heard someone say, oh, the form is superficial, the form doesn't matter, it's what's inside? It's a popular saying. What I so love, and we'll kind of conclude with this, is this hexagram is saying, no, the form and the substance both matter, but not if you put the form before the substance. When you put them in the right order and focus on them in the right way, then they have the right relationship with each other in a Taoist kind of sense. Your wardrobe does matter. Your beauty does matter. Love, understanding social dynamics and being liked, those things matter. If you put your spiritual development first, those things will follow with spiritual intelligence, and the adornments you receive, any popularity you receive, will not have the same tendency of snagging your ego and totally fucking you up karmically. References to adornments, she says, as a complete thought, indicate adornments that make you beautiful and luminous. What are the adornments that make us beautiful and luminous? So you can see, do you see how Jupiter in this hexagram is inflecting itself upon Venus? Jupiter is the keeper of Dharma. So Jupiter is truth. Jupiter is the way that truth filters into systems and structures of understanding that organize and bring coherence for every stage of evolution that we pass through: societal, human, personal, institutional, religious, educational, legal, democratic, all of the forms of government, all of the religious institutions, all of the institutions of higher learning, the paradigms that come to be meaningful to us at every step of the path that are often recycled and fall apart and then new ones develop. It's all Jupiter's territory. Jupiter is leading us on the path of understanding and wisdom. And for that reason, Jupiter is very magnanimous and is also a planet that, broadly speaking, supports life and growth and development, like proliferation of life. Venus was associated with symmetry, proportionality, harmony, beauty, and enjoyment. But you can't have one without the other. So if this universe were just an abstract set of principles, it'd be Jupiter without Venus. And there's a reason that Jupiter's feminine home sign of Pisces is the exaltation of Venus. Because what is truth without form? What is truth without life? What is truth without relationships or beauty or embodiment, sensuality, taste, pleasure? If truth is truth, then according to the cosmology of ancient astrology, it has to be embodied and livable and inhabitable and enjoyable. There has to be a sensual level where we go, I appreciate truth because I can taste it and it tastes so good. It feels so good. And if you've ever done any genuine work of transformation in your life, you know that one of the best pieces of evidence that you have grown is that you feel better. You feel good. You're usually also able to connect with more of the right kinds of people or bring more of the right kinds of things into relationships with difficult people. Or you're able to endure them or find a little bit more grace or appreciation in things that are difficult. This is because truth without goodness and enjoyment and pleasure and beauty and appreciation is not truth. The two planets have to go together. When Jupiter's in the superior position over Venus, however, it is like this reminder: don't put the beauty or anything superficial or sensual or that's not substantive. Don't put it before the substance. Now, it's a different set of teachings. There's a different hexagram. There's a different set of ideas that are appropriate when Venus is superior to Jupiter. So don't mistake me for saying that there isn't an interesting way that all of these things can't be flipped. There is, and that's why there's 64 hexagrams, and that's why sometimes Venus is superior to Jupiter and not Jupiter to Venus. But for Jupiter's superior trine to Venus, the teaching is really like substance enhances form, and the right kind of form enhances substance, and don't get it mixed up. So I hope that's useful. I thought this would be a really good teaching for the day to work with for the Venus-Jupiter connection. Now, what I want to do is here we go. Sorry. I want to do some horoscopes next. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask a question of ourselves about what is real and what is superficial. Where's the substance? Where's the beauty? How are they conversing? And we're going to do that for all 12 signs, looking at the Venus-Jupiter trine between two areas of life. So these are, like, you could say these are horoscopes that are meant to dovetail off from this I Ching meditation and to ask, okay, here's two houses, Venus and Jupiter are connecting through in your birth chart. What are they bringing up for me right now in terms of the external versus the internal, the form and the substance? I think this will be a fun way of looking at it. But as I go, given the topics of the houses that are being highlighted in these horoscopes, feel free to extrapolate. Maybe these topics are coming up in ways that don't perfectly fit the mold of today's meditation, and that's fine. Giving horoscopes a meditative shape is like an exercise, and it may not work for everyone as well as, something else. All right. Let's get into it. All right, so we're going to look at, remember that what's really interesting about these trines is that they bring up houses of the same philosophical family in ancient astrology. These are clearly illuminated for us in the Vedic tradition and topically resonate in the Hellenistic tradition. So we're going to use that to our advantage. And this is, if you've noticed, I've been doing this a lot lately. That's because my 2025 master classes were on this subject. You can pick those up through the Kickstarter too if you want to learn more. Okay, let's get into it with Aries first. These are moksha houses. So we're talking about Venus and Jupiter connecting through the moksha houses. And that's 4 and 8. So if we're going to talk about all of the, actually, you know what I'm going to do? This will make it a little bit easier. I'm going to write out questions for all 12 signs right here. Okay. Now, these are just some reminders that you can, like, it'll just be there on the screen for fun. Okay, so for Aries, the moksha houses 4 and 8 are highlighted. What is real? What is superficial? What is the conversation between the external and the internal right now with respect to emotional attachments? I say this because house 4 and 8 are both moksha houses, which have to do with the relinquishment of unhealthy attachments that are necessary for us to be illuminated and enlightened. The process of illumination and enlightenment is described as a process of enhanced freedom in consciousness, freedom of being. Well, one of the things that snags us in this material world, according to these ancient astrologers, are unhealthy desires and attachments that we become identified with, entangled with. We have a really hard time letting go of, even though they're actually the source of our suffering and pain. Well, right now, what are attachments that we have that are existing along the lines of Venus and Jupiter? What is superficial? Where are you seeking attention or love or support or nourishment or emotional validation from people or things that are really don't matter or that are lacking substance. It's a nice time for Aries people to look inward and say, what is real happiness and what is real positive emotional connection versus unhealthy emotional connection? Where do I feel truly supported? And where is there some level of support, but maybe one that's not very substantive if I look a little bit deeper? The opportunity to refine what emotional connections, bonds, or attachments are the good ones right now is maybe the most benefic part of this trine, to look at what constitutes a healthy home and family life, healthy bonds and partnerships, healthy soul contracts with healthy give and takes, and looking at those bonds or relationships that are only providing a superficial level of happiness or emotional security or bondedness. That's what I would emphasize for Aries right now. And that you may find that that's happening between intimate spaces with people and home and family spaces with people. Okay. I'm just realizing that, yeah, there's no way for me to, that's annoying. Oh, well. Let's go on now to, actually, here's what I'll do. I can do it like this. I'm trying to find a way to get a banner up that won't erase with everything else. Let's do this. Okay, I'm just going to put this banner up that won't leave us. Okay, let's go on to Taurus, where the trine is taking place between house 3 and 7. These are both comma houses, which have to do with the psychological, emotional, and relational quality of happiness or fulfillment. What makes you feel good? What makes you feel fulfilled? What's joyful? And what is conducive to happiness with other people? And also in your own mind, in your own psychology, in your own nature and being. So for Tauruses right now, there's this incredible ability to refine and look deeper at what is the most wholesome, pure, loving form of connection with other people. What actually makes you feel good mentally, emotionally, in your own mind and body, and what makes you feel seen and validated in your relationships with other people. Are there any ways in which you've been prioritizing a superficial level of emotional commitment or connection with other people, and you've been allowing yourself to feel satisfied with things that can only get at the surface? They can only really provide a certain superficial dimension of happiness or connection. Here's an opportunity to find something more substantive. Or here's the opportunity to get clearer. I mean, even just knowing what the limits of certain bonds are. There's people that we have in our life, and we talk about this in 12-step program. Go to Al-Anon. We talk about this a lot. Don't expect someone who has proven themselves to be of a certain nature to be any different. Over a long period of time, people show who they are. To try to pretend or convince ourselves that we're getting more out of something than we are can be so harmful to us over a long period of time, because we start denying the true voice or the true instincts inside of us. We tell ourselves, oh, this is making me so happy. Well, is it really? Sometimes the first step to finding deeper happiness is to just accept the limitations of certain relationships around you. If, for example, we say, if you have an alcoholic family member, you go, well, I'm not going to expect anything other than what they're like because of their drinking, and being honest with ourselves about that can actually be liberating. And paradoxically, we may actually feel a little bit easier around them because we're not trying to convince ourselves that something is possible that isn't, or that we're experiencing some level of happiness that we aren't. And we think we ought to be because, well, I should be, this is a family member, so I should be feeling better about them than I do. And so we can delude ourselves to convince ourselves that we're experiencing levels of happiness that we're not. This trine can be so useful in terms of saying, look, this is the difference between something that actually feels good and connected, that feels good in my own body, in my own mind, in my own heart, And in this relationship, these features are there, and this other thing doesn't. One of the things that I think has happened, I've seen it happen so many times in my astrological counseling practice, a version of this kind of story, is someone will come in and they'll be in dating mode. They're looking for a partner. And one of the things that happens is they'll go through a phase where they're meeting people that are nice, and like on paper, there's enough there, but they have to go through a moment where they realize that it's not enough. And it's okay that it's not enough. It's not a deficiency in me that I'm not compromising and just starting a marriage with someone that isn't, isn't exactly what I want. And it's funny because I find that often that is a specific sign that a good, healthy partnership that is enough is coming, because they say no to something sort of mediocre. They have to say, no, I'm looking for something exceptional. And that voice in me that tells me I ought to be settling for something because it's not bad. Well, that, just because something isn't bad doesn't mean it couldn't be a lot better. So I just wonder about Tauruses right now, really getting clear as to what real happiness looks like, and maybe not compromising, and maybe saying, look, it has to be exceptional. And then on the other hand, maybe learning to live with certain deficiencies that may always be there, but if you release yourself from trying to make them things more than they are, you may paradoxically feel a little happier with things. These are some of the things that come to my mind in two houses that have so much to do with mental, psychological, emotional happiness in relationships and in one's own mind and body. That's the common nature of the 3rd and 7th. All right, let's go on to Geminis. Whoops. Here we go. So for Geminis, we see this trine connecting Jupiter and Venus across the 2nd and the 6th. These are Arcta houses that have to do with material resources, material forms of support, assets, and how we manage them, how we use them, things that sustain life and give us material security, but also the work, sacrifice, effort, and labor that are associated with work and survival and asset acquisition and success and things like that in the material world. You got to work hard. There's a lot of things to overcome. There's a competitive market out there and so forth. So the 2nd and the 6th both pertain to this material level of things. What's interesting here is there may be a really powerful opportunity to reflect upon what is real and substantive right now that is motivating your pursuit or development of assets, or your use of assets and material energy, versus what's hollow. There comes a time in many people's lives, I've heard many celebrities talk about this, where they have earned millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they sort of have it all. They've got the car, the house, they've got all the clothing, they've got all the accolades. They've probably had a lot of people, worship them, so forth. And they go, yeah, but I came to realize that all of that really didn't make me happy. I wonder right now, with Jupiter inflecting itself on Venus from the 2nd to the 6th, if you're not asking yourself as a Gemini, is this really worth it? Is this really making me happy? Is the work and effort I'm putting into things going into the right outcomes or use of my assets? This could be something as simple as realizing that you're earning a lot of money, but you're spending it on a bunch of crap. Right? And maybe there's just this beautiful realization that can come in that says, I think my values are shifting. I think they're going in a different direction, one that is in line with my spiritual growth and evolution, one that's about healing, one that's about realizing that there are some different things that are actually going to make me happy with how I earn or spend or what I cultivate or develop materially. What kinds of struggles are worth it and what aren't, emotionally and spiritually as well? Look, we're all going to struggle materially, but if it's only bringing some superficial level of happiness, if it's not rooted in something that has transcendental meaning and value, then what good is it? These are things to consider right now. All of this is, in my mind, a kind of miracle. The fact that we are provided opportunities by reality through transits like this to deeply reflect on and refine and refine what is good, what makes us happy, what flips our hair back and excites us, and that we can course correct if things have been lacking or shallow, and that we can do so joyfully, or we can find ourselves in the stream of a new definition of happiness, that something like that should even exist as just a gift. Oh, it's time for this transit. You get this gift of getting to recalibrate in this way. You know, like, holy shit, it's so cool. It's so interesting. How can we ever get bored when things like this are happening? I mean, and I get it because, you know, we're often struggling with these transits. It's like one transit after the next. When is there not some healing crisis on my doorstep? You take a moment with transits like this to realize how powerful it is to get the opportunity to reflect on what is actually beautiful, what is actually substantive, what actually makes me happy, what actually brings me bliss. What that means, if we take the time to do it, is that we will get to feel greater happiness. There's still suffering, but we can refine what real happiness feels like and looks like in our lives. That we're given that opportunity is fucking fantastic. All right, so let's go to Cancer. We have the 1st and the 5th house, Dharma houses. So it doesn't get more about character and selfhood and self-development and refinement of one's true nature, probably, than for the Dharma houses. For Cancers, we're looking at Jupiter in your 1st house and Venus in your 5th, a place of children, the arts, creativity. That's the creative Dharma house, where your authentic essence is only alive and active to the extent that it's being creatively articulated and shared in the world, expressed in love and relationships, expressed through the art of creating children and raising them, having relationships with them as they're like weird little creative mirrors for your own nature. And we only experience a certain level of happiness to the extent that we're sharing our creative capacity with the world. But right now, for Cancers, you're getting a chance to go, well, what is that? And what is really creatively, authentically satisfying to me? And how does that correlate with a growing, deepening understanding of who I am? And your authentic nature is an ongoing discovery process. It's there. It's not like cultivated as much as it is discovered. It somehow exists timelessly. But as we discover it, the experience is, so many people describe it the same way. Oh my God, of course, this has been there all along. And it's like coming home to some part of myself that I had forgotten about. That's why it's sort of timeless. Cancers, you're coming home to some parts of yourself right now. And as you're coming home to those parts of yourself, you get this opportunity to refine what actually feels creatively satisfying. What is the actually satisfying use of your time and energy creatively? You are a creator in this lifetime. You're constantly putting things into the world that have real outcomes and effects on the world. So are those actions the realist actions that they could be, in alignment with the realist person that you are? And do they make you happy? Do they feel good? Is there something shallow? Is there something that needs to come out and be seen more that has been tucked away? Some external form taking precedent over some inner essence? Really great time to reflect on this. All right, let's move on to Leo. Moksha houses again. So we have Jupiter in the 12th and Venus in the 4th. I'm taking a small chocolate break. Okay. So for Cancers, or excuse me, for Leos, we have the Moksha houses. So release from entanglements, suffering, unhealthy attachments are at the core of houses 12, 8, and 4. House 12 is sort of the softest, or house 4 is sort of the softest of them. House 12, often the most difficult. When you think about moksha in the 4th, you're almost thinking about going to bed at night or your bedroom, in the way that your home can serve as a safe place of daily release from the drama and suffering and entanglements of the world. We get to let them go to a certain extent. Then there's entanglements that come from home and family too, you know. But for Leos right now, the question is, it's about truth. And it's about, what are you hiding from yourself? And the Jupiter in the 12th house is such a process of exploring faith and belief and truth, what you're denying or hiding from, what you're trying to avoid or evade, what you just can't face or deal with. That's actually there, ready to help you as soon as you can turn to it and let it in and let it be a source of wisdom. This is one way of looking at Jupiter in the 12th transits in general. Now, the trine to Venus in the 4th suggests that there may be a level of discomfort or conflict around home, family, the roots, the resting place, your private or internal sphere, that have some history behind them, maybe familial or ancestral history. But it's like there's a deeper level of happiness that can exist in your life, in your home, the private sphere, domestic life, or family life, if you'll only let the teacher guide you. Whoever the teacher is, could be your higher self. Maybe there's a therapist in your life or a healer that's been helping. But whoever it is, it's like there is a form of guidance and support that's trying to liberate you from things that, if liberated from, will lead to happier, safer, more peaceful existence. And you may be living, a certain level of, when we achieve a certain level of stability that's livable, that's doable, it's like that relationship scenario I was describing earlier. People think, well, it's not bad. Who am I to demand much better than not bad? But the same thing can exist in the home space or the domestic life, where you say, well, it's not completely dysfunctional. It's livable. It's relatively safe. But if we let the teacher in, let the healing come in, we may find that actually the experience can get even better, much better. So where does that healing work need to happen so that you can go from good to great? So that maybe something a little external or superficial becomes much more substantive around home, family, emotional bonds, happiness, and emotional security. All right. We're going to go to Virgo next. So here we have the comma houses again. Social happiness, collective, societal, public forms of happiness and satisfaction emotionally. That's the 11th house. In ancient astrology, the 11th house has to do with the allies, the groups, the friends, the benefactors, and any level of socially realized success and happiness. That's why it's called the house of wishes, dreams, and aspirations, the place of good spirit, the place of benefactors and positive community and social experiences. Now, depending on what planets are there, the ruler, all of those things can become more complicated. But that's it on an ideal archetypal level. Whereas third has so much to do with the mental, emotional, psychological dynamics of our lives, and the degree to which we can feel happy in our own psyches is going to be of great concern here, with Venus there in a water sign. So with these two planets connected, there's a way in which we may be having to adjust our own personality, our own psychology, our own inner life and experience, so that we can experience greater social ease or happiness. Or vice versa. If we adjust our social experience, we may find that there is a much deeper and more substantive level of happiness available to us mentally and emotionally. I feel much more happy when I'm with the people that, for whatever reason, I haven't recognized are really the right ones to be around. I've been spending my time with the wrong people, rooted in my own psychological insecurities, and it's given me some degree of popularity or some degree of success or some measure of happiness. But there's something a lot more substantive that I could be experiencing if I allow my social experience to be refined or reshaped. Jupiter retrograde in the 11th, perfect for that. Who are the people that feel safe, like home, supportive, familial, emotionally nurturing? And what's kept me from these people, you know? Or another way of looking at it might be, I'm surrounded by wonderful people, but I have to work on myself. I have to work on my own attitudes, my own behaviors, my own psychological patterns of communication, because I keep making these relationships problematic because I haven't done the work to feel happy enough with myself, like my self-esteem or something like that. So these are things to consider in the social dimensions of the comma houses right now for Virgos. I look at my daughter developing this. She's been doing a lot of work recently around friendships and social life and her own patterns and how they contribute to her happiness or her problems socially. And this is all ramped up tremendously to the point where she's, when we have our kids talk to therapists somewhat regularly, proactively, not because there's any problem that we perceive. And I've talked about that on the channel before too. A lot of people don't go to therapy because they don't think of it until there's a problem, but it's really good to just talk to other people about life, get some objective opinion from people who are sensitive and thoughtful. She's taken to her therapist questions about her own behavior, her own attitudes, her own perceptions within her social experience, as well as what social groups feel right or not so right to her, as soon as Venus entered Scorpio and starts connecting through that whole sign trine to Jupiter in the 11th. Not surprisingly, yesterday became a big session for her with her therapist on this topic as the two planets are connecting. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. Reflections on who we are, what provide the right social context that matches our emotional psychological context, and not stopping just because something is okay. Or really looking carefully at what's superficial versus what's substantive. Okay, so for Librans, we are moving Venus and Jupiter into the 2nd and 10th houses. Another chocolate break. They might come more regularly the further we go. All right. 2nd and 10th houses are Arta houses. So money, energy, work in the world, reputation, vocation, things like that. Public standing according to material success, power, influence. So for Librans, the question is what's real versus what's superficial, what's substantive versus what's hollow, external versus internal dichotomies around things like work in the world, reputation, workplace, money, resources. How do you use or spend money, time, or energy toward what ends? And are they providing you with substantive, deep, soul level happiness? Is your career providing you with substantive meaning in life and a feeling of well-being, satisfaction with what you're doing? Are your values at play in how you earn and spend money? Is there a level of success you've achieved, a level of happiness between things like money and career that could get a lot deeper and realer and more powerful and more satisfying? In what ways is that, again, dichotomy between superficial success, superficial adornment, and inner substance conversing right now? What kind of success could feel even better than the kinds you've received already or that you're pursuing currently? What shift of focus could provide even more bliss or happiness? What change of your values could make you even more satisfied with whatever success or money you're receiving or earning? These are the kinds of questions that I would be looking at right now for Librans. So the real focus here is on refinement of your relationship to the material world and how you derive pleasure and connection with your work and your money, your earnings and resources, your influence in the world, things like that. Okay, let's go along to Scorpio. So we're back in the Dharma houses. It doesn't get realer, as I was saying earlier, these water signs rising. So Jupiter in the 9th house, in that superior trine to your first house, is really like, what are the teachers? What are the religious or spiritual experiences? What is the progress of spiritual practice in your life? Jupiter in the 9th is like quintessential development of wisdom, study, learning, teachers and teaching, philosophy, questions about higher truth that are really fertile right now for Scorpios. At the same time, they're connecting so intimately to questions about who you are, what makes you feel beautiful and happy and attractive. What are you naturally attracted to? Who do you like? Who do you like to be around? What makes you feel satisfied emotionally, sexually, physically, whatever? And how can there be more of a connected, vibrant conversation between the development of your beliefs, your understanding, your spiritual path in life, and what looks and feels good to you? It could be something as simple. I mean, this is kind of like, hey, I'm discovering yoga. I'm gonna go get my yoga pants. I'm gonna get the lotus tattoo or whatever. But the real question, I think, aside from those sort of jokes, is just how do I represent and integrate the wisdom I'm developing? So, and it's a sensual, embodied way of bringing that wisdom from the 9th into your selfhood, how you show up in the world, how you speak, how you dress, the perfume you wear. I mean, it's very sensual. It's very physical and embodied with Venus in the 1st house. So if you're into goddess, if you're studying the ancient goddesses right now, the question is, how do you become that ancient goddess in your form, in your body? How do you represent this beautiful thing in a substantive way? So the connection between higher dharma, as in what is true and real, at big level, like going to the university of the universe, with Jupiter in the 9th, and then saying, how do I bring that into this very embodied, sensual Venusian dimension of my selfhood? All right, for Sagittarians, we're back in the moksha houses, liberation from karmic entanglements. For Sagittarians, I think that there's a possibility for some really deep and meaningful work around family, around relationships, around things like sex, love, and interpersonal dynamics, as well as like marital and family dynamics, ancestral karma. The reason I say this is because Jupiter in the 8th in Cancer can be so rich when it comes to mining ancestral and family karma and the blessings and curses of family or ancestral karma. I've seen this a lot already in the lives of Sagittarian clients and students and so forth, even family members, since Jupiter has entered Cancer in the lives of Sag risings. Venus in the 12th at this time also connects to the hidden, shadowy, secretive, unconscious, maybe unhealthy dynamics of love, sex, and relationships. And so the potential right now to really look at what brings happiness, and is it substantive? What could deeper, more profound, more spiritually aligned version of bliss and happiness look like? And what kinds of entanglements karmically might need to be loosened or let go of for that deeper level of happiness? I mean, do I have to go to therapy with someone who I know isn't going to want to go to therapy? Do I have to have a conversation? And could it be that having that difficult conversation disentangles and actually creates more happiness? So all the fear you're feeling about taking that step it's actually going to turn out in your favor if you have the courage to take that step. Steps toward disentangling from unhealthy dynamics that are only providing a superficial level of happiness are going to be so good for you right now if you're a Sag. If there's also an opportunity for deeper psychological and emotional bonding that comes through the process of doing healing work with other people, I think one of the things I've always it's been like the anchor of my marriage has been the fact that both my wife and I are actively engaged in working on ourselves. Therapy, all different kinds of, healing modalities. They've both been very important to us. And so when I see an issue in my wife or she sees one in me, there's a pretty deep level of trust that I don't have to try to tell her what to do or who to be, that her own process will take her there. And time after time after time, because I know my wife is doing her work, I don't have to try to figure her shit out. And she doesn't have to figure mine out. We can just hold space for it. I mean, sometimes obviously you tangle about how you wish the other to be. I think that's a part of every relationship. But when you're with someone, a friend, a lover who is doing their own work, sometimes there comes these inflection points where because they're doing that work and they have a breakthrough, suddenly you're connected at such a profoundly deeper level. They feel like, hey, you gave me the space to heal and change and grow, and you could have been really annoyed with me, but you loved me and you held space for me. And now look, here I am. How much deeper a level of happiness can we achieve when we hold space for each other and we keep doing our own work to grow? And then we get to have moments where there's just a flooding of healing and breakthrough that create deeper happiness for people in relationships. This is why it's so important when we're in relationships to be in relationships with people who are doing that work and to also give them the space in the relationship to do that work on their own. When those two things are in place, in my experience, when breakthroughs come, it is like celebrations in heaven. You really both get to bliss out over the progress that your significant other, partner, friend has made. I think for Sages right now, the question is that happening or not? If it isn't happening, then what superficial forms of happiness are you holding on to within the relationship? They're not going to last forever. What deeper happiness is what, is available. So. All right, let's go to Capricorns. So for Caps, we have Venus and Jupiter in houses 11 and 7. Now, for these two, we're talking about comma houses again. So pleasure, social pleasure, and relational pleasure. I think, someone mentioned this in the chat somewhere. I think they were talking about the fact that Kurt Cobain had Venus in the 7th and Jupiter in the 11th. And it was Pisces in the 7th. That Venus was with Pisces and Venus was with Saturn in Pisces in the 7th and Jupiter was in the 11th. But what's interesting to me is the way that chart so perfectly exemplifies the relationship between 7-11 when there's some exalted planets, Venus and Jupiter both exalted in his chart, popping across 11 and 7. It's not quite this for Capricorns, but it has a resemblance to that chart. And so what's interesting is if you look at Kurt Cobain's relationship with Courtney Love, it was a powerful, very public, very socially beneficial or advantageous relationship in terms of fame, notoriety, public success. But it was sort of infamous and as well. And that's sort of the Venus-Saturn dynamic in the 7th in that chart. What I'm actually trying to do here, though, is say that whenever I think of like power couples or the intersection between the kind of marriage and bliss or happiness that I'm looking for in an interpersonal dynamic, a partnership, and the 11th house, I'm usually thinking about how does this relationship convey into the kinds of social goals that I have? An easy example being tons of people with strong 11-7 trines will seek marriages that are socially opportunistic at worst or advantageous in truly good ways at best. So the Capricorns right now, you might be looking at a time where you're sort of reaping the benefits of your marriage. It's providing you with lucrative social advantages. Or you could be looking at a situation where you're saying, and I've seen this like probably 1,000 times. Someone comes in and they say, well, I married, and because mostly I see women and mostly clients are women, right? So they come in and they say, well, I married this guy who's like a good provider, and at the time provided me with a sense of social affluence or stability, or kind of a socially prominent guy who, made me feel like I belong to a certain culture of success or whatever. And now I went to a yoga class. Yeah. I got the Lululemon pants and I want a new husband. I'm kidding, but the questions of what constitutes relational, marital, and social success and happiness is often quite superficial between these two houses when there's difficult karma there. And then things have to go significantly deeper. And maybe that means that a person has to work on themselves and find different social outlets than just the ones provided by their spouse. There's nothing wrong with their spouse, but they need more spiritual community, and their spouse isn't going to be the one to provide that. It doesn't make their spouse an enemy or a bad person, right? No, you need a different social outlet because you're realizing there's only a certain level of happiness or success and satisfaction that can be derived from this relationship. So you got to find something a little bit different. Or another thing that will happen is a person will say, all of a sudden, I'm realizing that all of my girlfriends, I did ketamine therapy, and I'm realizing that all of my girlfriends totally lack self-esteem, and these relationships are somewhat superficial, and I'm always the one holding space for all of my insecure friends, and then you go, well, maybe I need to deepen or extend or expand my friendship pool to include some people who have a little bit healthier dynamic, and that I'm not always the person holding space. I won't get rid of friends, but I need to expand my friendship circle so that there's something a little bit more supportive of me that exists in my life too. You see what I mean? So it's explorations of pleasure and satisfaction between interpersonal dynamics and social communal dynamics that are at play here. And maybe some very positive forms of support or success that you could find right now as well. But I'd be surprised if they didn't come along with questions about superficiality versus depth. All right, so for Aquarians, we're looking at 6 and 10, the Arta houses. These are, again, work, material energy, things like money, power, success in the material sphere, with things like assets and acquisitions and resources and money and mastery or notoriety publicly, specifically with respect to vocation, are typically involved. Well, for Aquarians, the question might be, what this Jupiter in the 6th in Cancer specifically tends to correlate to things that you care about really deeply. It's like a mom who will get sick. Like, I don't know how many times my wife has done this, you guys. I can always see it coming, and I'm like, yeah, you're going to do it again. Kid comes home sick from school, got a fever. And of course, they're going to do much better through the night if they're in mom's arms, while they're sleeping with their fever. And sure enough, within 24 to 48 hours, Ashley's then sick. And she's always like, she's such a soldier. I was like, I don't know how you do it. The reason I typically can't do it is because A, I'm a dick who won't do it. Hey, I'm just an asshole. No, but more specifically, everything in because I'm the breadwinner, and everything in my life is like a conveyor belt of production, classes, content. It all has to be like clickety, clickety, click. She's always jumped on the grenade to make sure that I can get up and do my work and not have to trudge through 4 days of content creation and class teaching and all of my regiments without getting sick, which is like, I love that woman so much for doing that for me. And I have taken some grenades at times, for sure, but she goes through that over and over and over again. And the point is that she's a Cancer rising. Many Cancers are like this. Many water signs are like this, where you are so willing to surrender something of yourself because you care so much. It's like Saint Francis, you know, just taking care of all of the animals. Jupiter in the 6th for Aquarians right now probably correlates to a year in which what you really care about, what you have a deep level of like devotion to, is important right now. So what's the connection between that and social and professional success, vocational success and direction? And are those two things synced up so that there's meaning, purpose, devotion, commitment to things that you care about that are bigger than yourself? That's the Jupiter and Cancer in the 6th, but that are delivering enough of the right kind of happiness or support or connection professionally. If you really, really care about the environment, and you're in a work environment that cares nothing about the environment, but you're getting a raise, it's like, well, that's satisfying, but every day I just feel like I'm in a space that shares none of my actual values. It's kind of a weak example because I can't even like imagine a scenario where that would happen, but something like that, where you have to look at what your motivations are for doing the work, making the sacrifice, putting in the effort, and therefore what kind of feedback or success or goals are going to make you feel happy to achieve or not. And also just a time where hard work pays off. Like quite simply, this connection can just be, hey, it's raining some blessings because you've put in a lot of hard work. And then the question is, what do I build on from here that will be even 1 or 2 layers deeper going forward? That will be, you know, that will feel even better, that will give me even more of a sense of fulfillment. All right, so for Pisces, we have the Dharma houses, once more for the water signs. So the 5th house Jupiter is all about reconfiguring, reconfiguring your life so that your sense of creative purpose it's like a compass that gets to direct the story of your life right now. And that could be, hey, look, I'm in a period of time where I'm becoming a mom, I'm having kids. The creative act of bringing children into the world is going to start becoming the compass that's pointing my life in a direction. But it could be anything, as long as it has to do with your sense of creative, authentic essence. How you act and create in the world is sort of like the moral, spiritual compass of Jupiter. But then connecting with Venus in the 9th, it's really asking you to reflect upon and consider your beliefs, your moral, spiritual, philosophical process of learning, growing in wisdom and understanding, developing spiritual practices, finding the right teachers or learning or faith or spiritual communities. All of these things are suggesting that questions of satisfaction, purpose, happiness with other people right now have to do with creative and spiritual or philosophical alignment. So for example, if there's like, you have a certain amount of people in your life right now that you consider to be like, maybe they're more open-minded and you share some political or ideological similarities, you know, everyone likes to go to similar concerts or whatever, but you're starting to go 2-3 levels deeper. You're starting to study astrology, you're going into therapy, you've just done microdosing for 3 weeks for the first time, and there's some really deep stuff getting unearthed. You may find that even though there's already a certain level of spiritual and creative commonality that you share with other people, and it's like, it's good, but how much deeper and more satisfying could it get? Love, sex, relationships, friendships, in your life, how much deeper and more satisfying could these things get if you stay true to a process of creative and spiritual cultivation that's happening right now? This could also be a time where you're just finding natural harmony and alignment between things like women, spirituality, creativity, things like parenting, or I could see this being like a group of mothers and artists getting together, you know, women who are sharing a path of painting and like maybe even like homeschooling, a group of parents who are homeschooling their kids and rewilding them and, you know, like whatever. So I think the biggest picture here for Pisces has to do with faith, religion, learning, and creativity. Those right now, those facets of your life can provide a lot more happiness and satisfaction if you listen to the direction that Spirit's giving you right there. Okay. We did it. We made it. Okay. Let me hide this banner. This has been fun. I'm going to promote the Kickstarter campaign, and then I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Now, we have been live for almost 2 hours. In those 2 hours, we have had one backer. So, all of you need to click the link. I'm going to take you over to the Kickstarter campaign. I'm using my Cancerian guilt trip skills. All right. Here's the Kickstarter campaign. Head over to the Kickstarter. The link is in the comment section, pinned to the description of this video. When you go to the Kickstarter, make a contribution, support the channel. If you like this content, if it's meaningful to you, if you get something out of hearing your horoscope now, throughout the year, as it goes on, every little contribution means a lot. There's a staff of 12 of us, a full-time social media manager. There's 3 hours worth of work every day that goes into curating this content 7 days a week now. The platform serves as a place to support growing astrologers. We support in all of our classrooms. The success of the Kickstarter supports people of low income or real financial struggle to be able to study a spiritually uplifting and transformative topic. And the best thing is when you donate, we're not just asking you to donate and get nothing out of it. We have a lot of really cool gifts that you can pick up when you support us. We are trying to get to 2,043 backers by the new year. As of today, we're at, what are we at? 230. So we have quite a ways to go, which means we need everyday people like yourself tuning in to take a second and pitch in and support us. Okay. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you have a question, feel free to put it into the chat box. I'll do a little bit of Q&A before we close for the day. Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate you. This is a good question. What if this beneficial momentum stays unconscious? Well, yeah, that's a really good question. And first of all, I don't think we'd have any way of knowing if it had. You know, because who's to say we really have any understanding of what the hell is going on at all? In my view, I'm not sure we do or can. So, one thing that I'll say is that one of the most beneficial things that you can do with astrology is actively reflect on the presence of the planets or the archetypes in your life at the time that the transits are happening, because sometimes we wait for something to feel like it's parachuting right into our open hands from the heavens. And because we're sort of looking up and looking too literally for something external to come and hit us, we miss the fact that it's happening in and through things around us. And sometimes we will mistake something that looks or appears subtle. We'll look at something that appears subtle and we'll say, well, that couldn't possibly be it. It's too little. I think Venus and Jupiter is going to be really big. But active reflection upon the small thing will often unpack, like it's like a mustard seed. It looks really small, but if you unpack it with an archetypal eye, you'll realize that it's actually profound. And I think one of the ways that we miss the momentum of a positive moment like this is by not taking the posture to receive it in prayer or in our psyches, so to speak, by saying, where are you? Help me see you. Help me appreciate your presence, assuming that it's there and that maybe it's our own unconscious that can't see it. If we're afraid of that, then ask to see it. Keep knocking at that door. And then what you'll often be surprised by is, oh, it just happened right over here in this little space. And now I have eyes to see it and appreciate it. And when you see it, the thing that makes it really big and provides so much momentum is that you thought it was small and insignificant. And being able to have your appreciation recalibrated is what makes it big. Because then it's a big thing in your awareness. And that's where the big is distinguished from the small. It's in your awareness, not in the literal thing. And astrology loves to play hide and seek like that. So astrology isn't much good if you're only taking it in on the level of A, information, and B, like objective things that will happen to me. If you actively reflect, where are you? Where can I see you? Where can I feel you? Where can I notice you? Direct my eyes, direct the eyes of my heart to receive. When you do that, then all of a sudden you notice it, and you notice it in what seems like the most unremarkable thing. And if you do that 100 times, 200 times over the course of the next couple of years with astrology, you start developing like a neural network for astrological symbolism that is literally like having new eyes. You'll start to see the world very differently, and it heals you from the inside out. But you can't do it if you just sit there going, what if nothing really good happens to me? Not that you're asking that exactly. I get what you're asking, but that's sort of a take for you. What makes whole house system better than others? It's not better, right? It's not a matter of better. Because better, usually in the minds of people who say what makes this or that house system better, there's typically a best implied in the question. And there's like a worst, or there's a scale of like least accurate to most accurate. This kind of thinking is not a part of the epistemology of divination. So it's sort of similar to saying like, what makes the Rider-Waite tarot better than this other deck, or what makes this spread better than this spread? The only way of answering a question like that accurately from within the epistemology of divination would be to say something like, well, this tarot spread tends to be really good, maybe even better at this kind of reading. At least I've noticed that in my practice. So as an astrologer, I have tools that I use that in the scope of my understanding of astrology, my relationship with the oracle, certain tools or approaches work better than others for different kinds of things or purposes. But what's important is that any real diviner will always sort of qualify that this is an answer from within the context of my practice. It would be like asking an artist, how do you get this shading accomplished? What's the best tool or approach? How do you use your fingers? Or what specific technique do you use with how your hands work with the painting tool? Their answer will always be, well, I accomplish it like this, and for me, this tool works better than this one, or this approach works better than that. But all of those answers for an artist and any other artist listening to them there may be like, yeah, there's some tools that like, most artists agree upon. If you're going to do this kind of shading technique, use this tool, use this approach. It tends to work easier for most of us. But it's art, right? So there's understood in the medium of art is the artist, is the medium through which the art and the tools are being used, which is personal. So all tools in astrology are working through the conveyance of a diviner, and therefore talking about, you can only go so far to talk about objectively best methods, right? You can talk about like what's good for what kinds of things and so forth. So that's the first thing to say. But the second thing is that when it comes to whole sign houses, my argument for their, first of all, I think that most people, when they study the entire language of Hellenistic astrology, which is all taking place within a whole sign paradigm, what they'll understand is that in early astrology, when you say what makes whole sign house system better than others, there was no such question in early astrology because it just was whole sign houses. There was no other system. And then the entire paradigm of how you read aspects, how you understand house to house connections in every chart is all rooted in a whole sign paradigm. So when you learn the language of ancient astrology, it's not a house system. That's what people don't understand. They think, well, because we have Placidus now, we had whole sign then, they think that there's some way of comparing them. But it's more like saying the entire original language of astrology takes place in a whole sign paradigm. There is no other paradigm. So when you go back and you learn the language from that standpoint, in my experience, it provides a coherence when you look at charts, when you read charts, when you understand charts, that is significantly more lucid than quadrant-based houses. It's just more clear, coherent, organized, and the flow is both simpler and more sophisticated at the same time, which is bizarre to say. So you have to immerse yourself in the whole paradigm of ancient astrology to understand what whole sign houses are and how they're not even really a house system. Robert Hand, when he was first writing about whole sign houses as they were interpreting the ancient texts into English, as translating them, he said to talk about it as though it's a house system isn't really accurate. It's not a house system at all. It's just the original paradigm. So in that way, there's no way of meaningful comparing one house system to another until you've completely immersed yourself in the entire paradigm of Hellenistic astrology. Then you'll understand what whole sign houses are, and it's so much more than just a house system. So that's why you can't say it's better than others. It's just they're different paradigms, really. So I hope that helps. Would you say that Saturn going direct in the descendant can signify the death of someone we love? Sure. I mean, it could, but I wouldn't necessarily get really scared of that unless there's someone, currently in hospice care or something. Like, I certainly wouldn't recommend making yourself anxious about that, because there's a lot of things that Saturn on the descendant could signify, right? Have you ever considered the Venus aspect 3 from luminary sextile as the 3 tarot empress and the 4 luminaries, the square is Mars, the 5 was 5, the Hierophant? No, but I love that kind of thinking. I think that kind of thinking is what divination is all about. It's that symbolic correlations like that, as long as they are coherent and used consistently, become entrained ways that the oracle can speak with us. So what I don't like is just random scattershot associations that aren't being used consistently, because nothing consistent in craft will develop that way. But otherwise, there's a reason that things like the gene keys or human design have consistent success in describing things, a person's character, so forth. It's because there's a consistent logic and a consistent application of that logic throughout the system. So I have no problem with mapping like this, as long as the application is consistent in practice, because that's the oracle sort of sees those correlations we're making, or maybe even plants them in us somehow, who knows? But then it like, what does it matter if you don't use them and let the oracle start developing the use of those tools in practice? Because the oracle is using the language that we've made available to the oracle through our own psychic development and study. That's why I never tell people in our programs, no, you shouldn't go practice astrology fresh out of our programs. You should have 5 years of experience, because that's not how the oracle works. The oracle will bring to you mostly, in some exceptions, sometimes specific phases of our learning require that we encounter people who maybe we don't quite have the ability to work with, but often, for the most part, the oracle will bring us people that we do have enough ability to work with and serve. And it will use the language and the depth of the language that we've developed. And then it'll just keep adding to that as we go. There's no reason you can't get experience doing divination at small levels of development or learning, or lesser levels, or like more remedial levels. But the main thing is that you don't stop the learning, and that you stay humble and don't try to overextend yourself beyond what you already know. That's really the harder part for most people, because they just try to do too much. Oh, hey, Melissa, that's really sweet of you. Thank you. It occurs to me that perhaps astrology itself is the adornment of the divine. It's the poetry of the heavens telling the story of the universe. Yeah, exactly. I've been developing a talk that I'm going to give on a Sunday bonus episode in the next few weeks called Astrology is an Alien Language. And it's just like, it's like a written reflection or meditation that I'm doing a series of these to sort of start my wheels turning for my next book, which I'm going to start writing next spring or summer. And so I've been doing a lot more written reflections and meditations to start opening the channel, so to speak, for this next book. One that I've started developing that I'm going to cultivate into a sort of written reflection for a Sunday episode is called Astrology is an Alien Language. And I think you guys will like that. And it's a little bit along the lines of what you're sharing here, Lisa. Yes, we both create and respond to significance, and our interpretation reaps the fruits of our assignation. Yes, that's Jeffrey. He's brilliant. If you haven't read his book, The Moment of Astrology, it will change your life as an astrologer forever. He played such an important role. If you read the preface to my new book that will be out in paperback in the spring, so I've got 2 books. There's a new one I'm writing. There's one I just finished. The one that's coming out, the preface is basically dedicated to him. How to explain energy. Okay, so this is really fun. I love this topic. As you guys know, I've been talking about it a lot on the channel recently. So the Vedas explain reality as containing many, many dimensions, and only some of them are causal, temporal, where time is experienced as a linear flow. And those are all real dimensions, but they're not, they're partial, they're limited. You could say that they take place within the bounds of Saturn, like in our astrological language. So energy from the Vedic perspective is something taking place within the bounds of Saturn. It's real, absolutely real. The energy you feel in a yoga class, the energy you feel when you walk in a room, the energy you feel from Venus and Scorpio, all real, totally. However, energy and energetic interactions, energeia means to act upon. So it is the etymological history of the word and its use in science has a causal, it's a causally encased word. So in other words, energy is a part of a system of causes and effects. The point is that astrology is meant to point our awareness beyond our consciousness, beyond the realm of energy, of cause and effect. Of course, a huge step, huge for many of us through yoga, through meditation, through spiritual enlightenment, through mystical experiences that we have here will make us so much more aware than the average person of energetic interactions on this plane. And that level of awareness is a huge step in our spiritual growth. Don't get me wrong. So when people say they're aware of planetary energies, one of the reasons that they feel so resistant to someone saying that the energetic paradigm needs to be transcended is because the awareness of energies came alongside of some pretty amazing spiritual growth and development for most people. And so it's just like offensive to think that energies could, that describing things energetically could be very limiting. To hear that sounds offensive for someone who gained that perspective of energies through near-death experiences, or through severe loss and trauma, or through, deep inner healing work. And now you're much more aware of, and you've learned to manage and work with energies. Of course, all of that is huge, and it's still within the bounds of Saturn. That's the point. All energy described as interactions of forces acting upon one another, however subtle, however gross, is still within the bounds of Saturn, according to the Vedic tradition. Meaning, and I'm using that language from astrology, obviously. What astrology is meant to point us to as eventually, for example, you can't be a good practitioner of Ayurveda without awareness of energy. You can't be a good shamanic practitioner or energy healer without awareness of energy. So of course it's important. But the subtle point is that every time we only talk about astrology as energies and energetics, we're still just dealing within the bounds of Saturn. The non-causal, non-linear, acausal, retrocausal, other dimensions that are talked about in all ancient spiritual traditions go beyond time and causality. And so, for example, when you start thinking about something like retrocausality, what you're thinking about are a kind of, rather than one energy acting upon another, you're thinking about more like the Ouroboros. An energy is more like an expression than it is a force acting upon something. So anyway, it gets really complicated to try to describe energy from a non-linear perspective, though there's a lot of really interesting things that have been written and said about it. But long story short, when we go outside of the time-space container in our consciousness, we get glimpses into that realm beyond. That's what astrology is meant to be producing in our consciousness, is an awareness of something that goes beyond even energies, no matter how subtle they are. That doesn't mean it's not important to track and work with or be aware of energies. It just means don't get stuck in them. And a lot of people in modern New Age astrology are stuck in them just as surely as they're stuck in what all of these energies are going to do to me, or do for me, or do against me, that I have to try to manipulate, which is all, even at a subtle level, still demonstrating an attachment to the wheel of karma. This is why, for example, in Indian philosophy, as one progresses spiritually, the awareness of subtle energies provides a temptation that's associated with a siddhi, which is like a mystical power. Actually, your awareness of these subtle energies can develop into mystical powers that allow you to manipulate things on the causal plane. That's pretty fantastic. Those skills can be used for healing, but they also can become temptations because they amplify the ego's sense of importance, because a lot of people can't feel those energies. So then people start to think that they're more important than other people because they can. There's a huge shitload amount of that in modern New Age thinking and astrology. So anyway, these are just like things we have to be subtly aware of, so that we keep pointing ourselves in the direction of the transcendental plane. And if you want my humble opinion, I'll just sneak preview for you. When I'm talking about astrology as an alien language, what we're talking about is that the earliest astrologers said that astrology was coming from a daimonic realm. That the Christians end up using that word to describe like demons. But you see a documentary like the Age of Disclosure about the UAPs and all of the alien phenomenon, and the fact that, at this point it's just a fact that we have alien technology, intelligence, that we've actually had contact with other species. This is just a fact now. It's not even disputable. And this documentary does such a nice job of just unpacking all of that. It's still like a huge amount of the world doesn't know about this, or is not even like impressed by it. But when we watched that documentary, one of the things that I found interesting was that the only way that the physicists could describe some of the technology that they were observing, and these are like people who have been part of the projects and teams trying to potentially reverse engineer some of these technologies that the US and other countries have come into contact with. And one of the things that they've said is that they have a way of manipulating time and space with an awareness of technologies that are going far beyond the sort of causal plane as we understand it. All of the Vedic literature tells us that advanced species throughout the entire cosmos, I mean, that shit's super sci-fi. Read the Vedas, it's nuts. That they tell us that like all of these peoples are operating technologies that operate through consciousness. I mean, this is quite literally like the idea that your consciousness could be the source of fuel, let's say, to kind of use that fuel analogy, that it's likely that something closer to consciousness is being used to manipulate time space by these species. That's something we can't even wrap our heads around because we don't have, we have nowhere close to an understanding of what is real beyond the causal plane, right? I mean, we'll sort of tip our hats to like consciousness and the multiverse, and we'll kind of like, there's a sort of awareness that there's things that are bigger. But most of our languaging, most of our way of talking about astrology is very much caught up in a linear place. And all of these, interestingly, all of these, the I Ching, astrology, not just astrology in the West, but astrologies from all over the planet, are technologies that work by like penetrating the linear plane of awareness and making possible a more extra dimensional, nonlinear form of awareness in our everyday experiences of time space. That's what all of these systems do. So in that way, I've always thought, if there is any evidence, especially when the ancients are telling us that they come from daimons, that, that there are, call them angels, call them higher forms of intelligence that have brought some of these technologies to Earth, I'm on board with that. Why the hell could I have a problem with that? I've encountered things like that in 100 ayahuasca ceremonies. So how could I possibly scoff at that, Anyway, so I just want us to be more imaginative as an astrological community and stop staying so rutted in cliches, because they're not. This language, the more you study it, the more you study its roots and its history, is really asking us to step into some radical places in consciousness. All right. Can we say that the universe is self-aware or has its own will? That's a great question. I think I'll take this and maybe one more, and then we'll close for the day. But yeah, so like, again, I'm just going to be citing the Vedic tradition within astrology because it's a bit clearer historically in the text than our Western tradition. Our textual tradition is very much broken and scattered comparatively, but they all come from the same root system. So I feel very trusting in the Vedic philosophy. So yeah, like most of the people around the planet who have really amazing divinatory systems, the I Ching being the other one that I've spent a lot of time with, but certainly horoscopic astrology. These traditions look at the cosmos as like the one of the words or phrases that's used to describe the cosmos is the anima mundi, the soul of the cosmos. So in that way, the cosmos is seen as one sentient living being. If you think about it like this, if there's just a living being that has always been living, that will always be living, and it's just simply living, that's why trying to capture it in objective paradigms doesn't work, because it can't be contained by something objective because it's a being, not a machine. And so the way to get to know truth is to get to know it through a relationship with it in consciousness, because it's conscious and you're a part of it. If you want to know who you are, you're a part of it. And if you want to know what it is, get to know it. As you get to know it, you get to know yourself. And in that relational paradigm is why these languages are disseminated by beings. They're always disseminated, like all of the, where do they attribute this coming from? From higher forms of intelligence that are trying to convey something to us about the nature of who we are, about the nature of what is real, and about the nature of how to relate with it. So it's animistic. It's like panentheism, or it's like polymonoanimism. You know, it's the many in the one as a living thing. So does it have its own will? Will, the entire conversation about will is actually nothing more than a descriptive, like it's like a poetic way for being to describe itself. I am willful. But that doesn't mean that it has a will, which subtly, in the way we think about it, would mean that a will has it. A will does not have it. It can be described as willing. It can be described as willful. But it's also not limited by that, nor does it come to be possessed by something called a will. Does that make sense? So most of the ways that we have of trying to objectively describe any facet of reality are actually ways that reality has of describing something that itself can be seen in light of, but is not defined or contained by. This is why the whole conversation about fate and free will is so problematic, because if you try to describe reality as like somehow contained by a fate free will paradigm, it's the same thing. You're trying to put something in a box that is capable of being described in either direction. Is reality creative and ultimately completely free and in a state of constant potential? Yes, because those are all poetic ways of describing the infinite nature of a living being called reality. You know, but is there a way in which every last thing in the universe is absolutely fated? Yes, because that's another way of describing an aspect of ultimate reality that is a living being, not a machine. There are all of these ways that we have of trying to describe things are all valid, but listen to what Rumi says more than what, you know, an empiricist says. If we want to get to what divinity is, a poet knows more in a sense than a physicist when it comes to this level of things, which is also why these aliens are not using, you know, like normal physics to operate ships. They're probably using consciousness, because consciousness is the actual living medium that transcends time and space, which is why, you know, their crafts can warp time and space. I don't know if any of that's true. That's just what I suspect based on everything that I've learned, and especially most of my ayahuasca experience and sort of what they've shown me about, you know, the limitations of like objective empirical thinking. There's a lot that empirical thinking can do, but at best what it does is it turns raw material into machines. And machines, the more that machines proliferate, the more that we start to embrace a vision of ourselves. We start looking into the mirror of machines and seeing ourselves as machines and seeing reality as a machine. And we don't even realize it, but this is like it's like a weird it's a paradigm that we've created to experience ourselves through. But like everything in time space, that mirror will eventually crack and fall apart. The only thing that is permanent and absolute is just being itself, and that's not something that we're going to contain. Paradigms are actually like this funny way that reality sort of lends itself to being temporarily contained, but only on the level of time space, you know. You're welcome. This is fun. I love talking philosophy, you know. It's like, this is absolutely my jam. So I think we'll end here for the day because I'm out of gas and need to have some lunch and then get to the gym and move my physical form around. But hey, thank you guys for being here. I hope that the horoscopes were useful, that you learned something about Venus and Jupiter, that you got to contemplate unfathomable things, because who doesn't like to do that on a Tuesday? Head over to the Kickstarter if you haven't yet. I'm going to place the link to the Kickstarter one more time into the chat. Guys, I don't know shit, by the way. I seriously, I literally don't know what I'm talking about like 99% of the time. And if I do, it's by some grace. Try to keep that perspective when talking about big stuff like this, you know? I'm convinced that the humbler we stay, the more likely we will be to qualify ourselves for meeting some enlightened species when they come to Earth. So I'm like practicing humility because I'm hoping that it might get me first in line. I want to meet the aliens. So anyway, much love to you guys. Thank you for being here. I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Remember to head over to the Kickstarter, support the channel if you like it, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, everyone.